I remember reading an article about Keith Fassett, and he had a project going where 6-inch squares of tapestry were done by various communities. And I was talking to Moira Young, and I said this would be a really fantastic idea for Ullapool to do. And Moira was the one who picked up the idea and ran with it. That's where the original idea came from.
And then that would have been the tapestries went from that, and the quilts probably grew out of that for people that didn't so much want to do a tapestry.
That's right, yes. Yeah. There were people who wanted to do the tapestry, they thought they could manage that, and others weren't interested, and that's where the idea of the quilt came up.
I think I was contacted by Sheila Boots MacLeod at some point. I can remember being asked to come through and give a short talk about how we managed the Koigat quilt, which had been made in 1986, and I seem to remember two groups seemed to separate out, people who were interested in doing a quilt and people who wanted to do the tapestry.
That's for Joe Scott and Sal. We'd lived at Inverfolly and then we moved to Ullapool, so we'd help with the Koigat quilt, and so that's why we wanted to help with the Ullapool one.
I think we had a day where everybody brought fabrics in.
I don't remember that at all. Mine's all my fabric, I know.
Yes, because I notice on one or two of the pieces they've got the same fabrics.
I was on the ship at the time with Murdo,
yes,
and I got a lot of my materials from the engine room rags, although I'd taken the felt with me to do the clock. And we were on a round the world trip, and by the time we got to Singapore I'd almost finished it, and when I went up the road and bought the silver rat tail down the clocks, and so I was lucky to buy that there so I could finish it off before I came back.
I used all material from stuff at home because I used to make clothes for the children, so there were bits and pieces that I'd got left. I don't think I bought anything at all for it.
No, mine were just scraps out of the scrap basket.
We ran out of fabric for a bit of mounting on the right hand side of ours, and instead of redoing it, we just bunged in another bit of mounting which doesn't actually exist from that view, just to cover up the fact that we didn't have enough, because they were probably late doing it, knowing us.
The quilt, which shows other aspects of Ullapool, they're all the same size, but on the fishing quilt, they're obviously all different sizes. I seem to think that we just made them. I think Sheila put that together, and I think she just shuggled it about a bit and had to do the wee kipper as an infill.
The other quilt, with the regular size, we were given a size.
Were you?
I do remember
yes.
that, yeah.
And I know I said that I was going to do the clock, and so I was given a tall shape.
I think the idea was that it was going to do with the herring industry or the fishing industry, but other people wanted to do other things as well, and so other aspects were brought in. I know there's one which is to do with the hector, and then at the time there was pony trekking in Ullapool, and so somebody wanted to do that, and then other people were interested in doing what their families were involved in, like the shoemaking.
I have a wee note from Sonia McRae, who, along with her mother, Heather McRae, did the cobblers scene, and she said that her mother wanted a piece to reflect the family history based on the cobbler's shop that Sonia's great-great-grandfather, Kenneth McRae, worked.
I imagine they wanted the ballet shoes as opposed to ordinary shoes, because Sonia was a beautiful ballet dancer and she learned in Ullapool.
Who assembled the quilts?
I get the impression Sheila certainly did the fishing one, because I can remember calling at her house with some of the squares. She was my contact in Ullapool, and I remember collecting the Koigat ones in when they were finished and taking them in and leaving them with Sheila. And I can remember going into her house one day and it was spread out on the floor, just the top sheet, and it was all sewn together. But she was responsible for most of the, well, nearly all the sewing on, certainly on that one. I don't know about the other one.
I can tell you about the other one. I assembled that with Rita McGregor on my sitting room floor, and I don't know why we got the job to do it, because I didn't think we were very qualified. But I don't think there was anybody else.
Quite a lot of people were winging it though, Robbie, to be honest.
Did someone contribute to the sashing's framing fabrics or wadding? Were there any financial contributions? Does anybody know?
I don't recall anything.
Don't think so.
I would have thought, if I'm not far wrong, I think the material would have come from the Bicentenary committee.
There was a fund,
yes.
wasn't there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, because it does actually take quite a bit because there's the backing as
Yeah.
well as the framing.
I don't think we did the trimming ourselves, the turquoise trimming, did we? Somebody else did that.
I was
So
feeling it might have been Sheila.
Handing in the raw,
Yes.
Yes.
the raw square.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have memories here from Sheila. She said, "It was lovely to be told of the quilt recording project. I've been trying to remember the making of the quilt, but the abiding memory is the dedication of Kathy McNeilage, just keeping everyone going and focused. Also Marlene in Akeltabui was building her house and producing the most beautiful 3D effect panels for the quilt. Her needlework was inspiring. She did the third panel in the middle section, the one I was involved in."
It's the 3D boat
Yeah, it's a 3D boat.
Right in the middle.
on the brown sail.
And Sheila did the lovely one of all the fishing boat names that were
Yeah.
fishing out of Ullapool at the time.
Chris and I were doing the Klondikers at night, so obviously in order to do our design we had to go out at night to have a look at it and see what it really looked like. So we parked above Ardmere in order to have the view of Annet Bay with the Klondikers with their lights twinkling, and it was slightly hairy because there wasn't really anywhere properly to park.
I'd forgotten how exactly right that looks. It's all sparkling in the light, just like the lights on the boats used to.
Oh, it
I'm
looks
really
exactly
impressed.
like it
I'm really
was.
impressed
Yeah.
It probably was your idea.
I think you were the one that came up with the idea of what to do and how to do it, not us.
Was I? Well, I don't remember.
can't remember, do you?
That's the trouble with being the age we are, I suppose.
It was a long time ago. I think Moira asked me to do mine after most of the others had been done, actually. I was quite a late arrival at the ball, I think.
I wonder if Sheila had planned it out and we were a space short or something.
Yeah, it could possibly be that.
Yeah.
I have also memories here from Rita McGregor, now Nap. She's living back home in the Netherlands, and she says, "I remember being pressured by Sheila Boots to make a piece for the quilt. She had also decided what I was going to make. I said that if I was going to make something at all, I would want it to be my own choice, and therefore my piece is not quite in accordance with the rest of the patterns." And yes, I remember running out of time to join it all together, and we sat on Robbie Mackenzie's living room floor, stitching furiously. But it was finished in the end, and my piece was put as the centrepiece, probably because it was too different and not an actual scene from Ullapool.
I actually love the knot. I think it brings everything
I
together.
think it's quite good, actually.
I think
When
it was
you
a
think
good
of it
choice.
With another scene
Yeah.
Brilliant, yes.
there, it would look a little bit flat. I was quite pleased with my herring panel. That sort of went quite smoothly. But the oyster catcher one, at the time I was up in arms about all the rubbish on the seashore.
Yes.
And I wanted to include all that, but then I thought, no, I can't really put that in because it might offend somebody. And so I just put a little bit in. There was an awful lot of rubbish which drifted ashore from the Klondikers.
My daughter Morven did the spinning wheel quilt. I'm not very sure as to how it came about, but myself and a friend had a newsagent shop called The Spinning Wheel, and we thought probably it was appropriate for her to do that. The other quilt I did was a stag with the mountains in the background, which again was helped with a friend, Sheila MacLeod. Also appropriate for this area, which we thought was the magnificent beast in the foreground. It's a lot harder than I thought, must admit, and I needed help with it because it wasn't as easy as I thought.
Chris and I were thinking that the main reason for choosing that subject was that it was part of what defined that era in Ullapool, the site of the Klondikers. But unfortunately what we couldn't convey was the smell, which drifted when the wind was blowing in a certain direction.
It was going to be boats anyway, because Cathy and her husband were always about boats. My father was always about boats. And of course we'd come here a lot when we were wee kids. We used to come from Lochindver in the boat, a wee boat.
I really had no reason for doing a boat. I think someone said you have to do an old-fashioned, an older boat. So I found a picture and I did it.
I did the clock, and it seems to be about the only one that isn't related to the fishing as well in that square. But I wanted particularly to put it back in the middle of the road, where it used to be, on the crossroads of Quay Street and West Argyle Street.
What's the time on it?
5 o'clock, because I was on the ship at the time when I was doing it, and of course all the lads 5 o'clock was beer time, so that was the time that was decided for her.
But it's always good to join in something
Yes,
and then see all the separate bits come together.
I know we were terribly impressed, weren't we? Because when we handed our thing in, that was it, and then when we saw the final product, and it was beautifully finished, and some of the amazing pictures that people had done, we were just very impressed.